just feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer!
I don't care what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the
Call
Cowboys.
this college rule!
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm Chris. This is Dom, a couple of comics who just like talking sports, and back on the diamond today with someone who didn't have the best attitude.
He didn't need an attitude adjustment, Chris. I feel like he was just right Goldilocks. No, he absolutely wasn't. God.
We're talking Albert Belle today, who there was this time in the early 90s where I distinctly remember him being like one of the greatest, one of the best hitters in baseball. And then because I was a kid, I remember stories coming out about him just being an asshole. And then really researching this, you're like, oh, God, he was the worst.
He was the guy the Team America guy was referring to. You see, there's three types of people. Albert Belle. But anyway, no. One of the 90s best power hitters. And boy, we've got an episode for you if you are not familiar and a baseball fan.
Yeah.
Albert Jawan Belle. He went by Joey.
He went by Joey for a long time.
And we're going to discuss why he goes by
switched.
Albert.
Yep.
But born August 25th, 1966 in Shreveport, Louisiana, and had a fraternal twin named Terry.
Who was also a really good athlete.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. His dad, Albert Sr., was a baseball and football coach in high school, and his mom, Carrie, was a math teacher. He had two teachers as parents. He had a very stable, goal-oriented upbringing.
And they were very big on higher education and pushing education, which he is a smart man.
Very smart.
God, is he?
They broke the mold when they made Joey Belle.
Yeah, we're actually right now he's Joey Belle.
Let's just keep calling him Joey. So he referred to his mom as the glue of the family, and his dad was the enforcers. And if that's not a Bash Brothers pair, I don't know what else
That's
is.
so true.
As you said, his mom promoted academics and his dad promoted sports, but academics was always number one.
Yes.
You couldn't play if you didn't get good grades.
Yes.
His dad pushed his boys into sports, but not like in a maniacal sense. It was just like, yeah, you want to spend some time with me and, get good because you appear to be two very good athletes?
Well, that's what it seemed like to me was in high school. It was very much like you and your brother and me, where it's like we're going to do baseball and football. Mm-hmm. And like it's not like life, but it is like this is what we're going to do.
And it's like, unlike a Hack Wilson, there was a lot of structure for him growing up,
Yes.
what I read.
Yes.
And not like negative structure, but just like you don't have to worry about anything but school and sports.
Yeah.
Just do well. After baseball practice, after his dad got home from school, the boys would come home and do their homework. And his dad would go home, talk to his mom for a bit, poke his head into their rooms and say, let's take some batting practice.
Yep.
So they'd drive. Well, his dad would drive in his car to the local junior high school, but he'd be driving behind both Joey and Terry.
Running.
Yes.
I know. I saw that and I was like, God, these coach fathers.
But he credited his dad for all those late night batting practice sessions. Was a star at Huntington High School, made National Honor Society.
Yep.
Was an Eagle Scout. His mom said would always do crossword puzzles, and he could spell backwards when he was 5. Graduated 6th in his class of 266 kids, was the vice president of the local Future Business Leaders of America, and was named to the '84 Junior Olympic team. What the hell?
That's pretty good. He was also a really great standout football player, which kind of you see why he goes into baseball because he was so good at it. But there was so much opportunity for him to go into football.
Well, he's 6'1", 200 pounds.
Yep.
I mean, like, he could have done anything. Even if it wasn't sports, he could have done whatever the hell he wanted to do.
Yeah.
But gets a scholarship to Louisiana State after being an all-state Louisiana player twice in high school.
Well, they said that Notre Dame offered him one for football.
Yeah.
And he just was like, made it clear, like, no, baseball's my path. This is what I'm doing, which I actually really love.
Yeah.
Because obviously football's like the bigger sport, if you will, especially college football. But just seeing that where he's just like, no. I'm a baseball player. This is what I'm going to do. I can hit the ball better than anybody.
I'm a hockey player, but I'm playing golf today.
That's right.
So from 85 to 87, he is an absolute stud at LSU. All SEC in 1986. He hit 2 dingers in the regional title game against Tulane to send him to the College World Series.
Yep.
That offseason, he played in the Cape Cod League, as we've discussed with some of our baseball players, for the Chatham A's and the Hyannis Mets. Over those 3 years that he played at LSU, he hit over 330 with 49 dingers. So, he's an elite prospect, an absolutely elite prospect. Although they lose in the 86 College World Series, 87's looking like it could be their year.
Well, and this is something that is always kind of, especially in college, where it's like some guys are just power hitters or some guys are just really good. He was everything that was good about a hitter. He was great batting average, doubles. He had great base running ability.
Yeah.
Which it was everything that you want.
He played a great outfield. I mean, he was a great defender. I mean, he could do everything you wanted him to do, but now we're starting to see some attitude
I was going to say,
problems.
87 is when people say that it became to the surface of him being you can't control him.
So his LSU teammate Pete Bush said, there was all this pressure and you could see it get to him. It got to the point where he'd strike out and guys in the dugout would be looking at each other and saying, I wonder what he's going to hit this time, or what's he going to throw?
Yep.
And his manager, the all-time great Skip Bertman, said he could hit with a matchstick. He was a hard worker. When he'd throw his helmet, I'd bench him. But he was a super nice kid, which...
It's interesting.
There's the I mean, I don't know if he's been diagnosed bipolar, but you could probably make the argument that it's what he's dealing with and not taking proper medication or seeking treatment.
Because he did have manic outbursts almost. You know what I
mean? And
mean?
they were manic. They were crazy.
And that's what the LSU guys, I remember, they were like, you can't calm him down once he gets to a point.
Yeah.
It's he gets there and it's just like, all right, we'll see what he destroys.
It's kind of like when I'm on stage and just yelling and
just
lighting,
yelling
sputtering out sentence fragments and lighting things on fire.
So true.
It is.
I thought this was America.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Skip Bertman. We live in a communist country.
But I did see that he was always a great player for the managers, but I feel like with his teammates, that's where you would see a lot of his irrational behavior.
And a lot of it, I think, is because he's such a high achiever and because he works so hard, he puts all this unnecessary pressure on himself.
Yep.
And this is not excusing it. I'm just trying to
get into his mind.
Trying to get into his mind.
That's
dude.
right.
Just walk around there. But we get to the 87 SEC tournament in Georgia, and they're playing Mississippi State. And there's a Mississippi State fan in right field brandishing a 2x4. Well, he doesn't pull the spilling beer on him like Newman and Kramer to Roger McDowell. He just continues to yell racial slurs at Joey.
And this being a Mississippi State fan,
Man of their time, man
Georgia,
of their region.
They weren't kicking him out.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was the thing that blew my mind when I read this, where I was like, why was this guy just allowed to do this?
Or there's another fan, a dad with a small child, bro, yell whatever you want at him.
Yeah.
Tone it down for the Jim Crow parts.
Exactly.
Just
because he was getting extremely racist, and
apparently he called him buckwheat.
Yeah.
Which is we're almost in the 21st century here.
Yep.
And even for that time, that's bad.
That's pretty wild.
So what does Albert do, Chris?
What
Joey?
What is
We're jumping
Joey?
back and forth.
He pretty much just was like, I've had it, and then tries to charge to right field to deal with this fan, and his LSU teammates literally had to tackle him and hold him down to be like, no, you're not. Which I still don't really understand why he gets suspended for that. I mean,
that never made sense. The only thing I'm going to take a stab at is he had done it was an accumulation of really shitty things that were small.
Yeah.
That might have been the last straw. And honestly, if I were one of his teammates, considering how big he was, I'd have just let him go.
Oh, yeah.
Because, if some racist pecker was yelling shit at my teammate.
Exactly.
You know what, Albert? I'll just be right behind you.
Yeah.
I'll
No,
be right
seriously.
behind you.
You're not going to need my help, but I'll be there just to pick up your stuff.
Maybe after you paralyze him. I'll kick him in the face a couple of times.
That's right. Yeah, so he gets suspended for the 87 College World Series, which, still looking back, it's like, that's crazy.
And they lose in the semifinals.
Yeah.
Which, if you're thinking, if Albert Belle plays, they probably win.
Oh, yeah, because he was their star hitter.
Yeah. But his draft stock, you're thinking this is a surefire first-round pick. You would think, right?
I was thinking he was top 5 pick. If you look at his stats throughout his whole LSU career, it's really like, God, he is such a great hitter. And man, does he plummet.
So the 87 MLB draft, this is kind of famous because first pick is actually Ken Griffey Jr.
Oh, yeah.
And also in the first round, Craig Biggio went. But people have started to talk, Wayne. Here comes Skip Bertman and his friend Albert Belle, the psychopath.
I didn't see this, but what happened with Atlanta?
So apparently, the people at the top of the Atlanta Braves organization, said they would fire anyone who advocated for drafting him.
Yep.
Which, wow.
It's wild, because I imagine you as like a scout or whatever, you're just like, we can control him. Look at these stats. He could literally help us win a World Series.
Like, I almost think of Barry Bonds, how when he was coming out of high school, he dropped to the second round.
Yep.
But then he goes to Arizona State, and he's a top 10 pick? I don't know what the hell happened, but all of these off-field issues, they've started to accumulate, and he ends up going in the second round at 47 overall.
47th to the Cleveland Indians.
And this is in the midst of them being the burn-on, we're shitty Randy Newman Cleveland Indians.
Yes.
This is not a good team. But he's their best prospect. He's out the gate, he is their best prospect.
By far. That's what I mean, where other organizations passed on him, and you're like, I wonder if they looked at him in, obviously, the early 90s, even late 90s, where they were like, we screwed up.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done that, but it's history now.
It's history.
So in 88, he splits time between Kinston in the Carolina League. If he had just toned it down, he could have hooked up with Tim Robbins' grandma.
Oh, it's not happening for him.
No. I mean, I don't know if it was because of the pressure or he didn't like the fire crotch, but you know what? Albert said no.
No.
Albert said no. He split time in Kinston, and then I did read he was in the Mexican League in the offseason, and he threw a catcher's mask out of the stadium, and they ran him out of the country.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Well, I'm sure it was, just like you were saying with the LSU, I'm sure it was a bunch of stuff that he was doing where they were like, we don't want this guy here at all anymore.
John Hart, the GM, said when he was in the minors, he told him, I just want to see you hustle today. And on the first at bat, he grounded out and basically loafed it to first.
Yep.
And they sent him home. Which is unbelievable. And in 1989, though, he ends up making Double-A Akron, hitting 20 dingers, he's this dingers doubles guy.
Yes.
Very much so. And because the Indians are so crappy and they need bodies, he's called up in 89, July 15th, and he gets his first hit.
Yep. First hit and RBI off this hit.
Off of Nolan Ryan.
Yep.
It seems like Nolan Ryan has gotten bested by a lot of these guys. But then again, he pitched for fucking ever.
I saw a stat on Nolan Ryan, just to break it off, where he pitched to 7 dad and son combos.
Oh, God.
That's how long Nolan Ryan played.
And that probably doesn't count dads he played with and then sons he had to pitch against,
yeah,
or vice versa. Oh, God.
Yeah, on his team kind of shit. Yeah.
That season in 62 games, he has 7 homers, 37 RBIs. And in 1990, this is a bit of a rough season for Joey. It's a bit of a rough season. I did read that in June, he was suspended for 5 games for trashing a Colorado Springs, because he's in AAA, bathroom and destroying a sink, which ended up getting him sent to rehab for alcohol abuse.
I was just going to say, so there were, and I wonder if this had implications on his draft dropping so much, because there were talks of him having a bad alcohol problem. And not even that it was excessive, that when he got drunk, bad things would happen.
Yeah, and not cruel and tragic shenanigans.
Yes,
is a good
not
way
the
of
fun
putting
kind of shenanigans we like to have.
No. So he ends up going to rehab, and after his stint there, he changes his name.
No more Joey.
No more Joey. We're all about Albert Belle. 91, not such a great season. I read on June 6th, his manager, John McNamara, called him running to first base on a double play the most blatant lack of hustle I've ever seen.
Yep.
They sent him down to AAA when he was leading the team in home runs and RBIs.
Because it was a discipline thing. That's what the manager would always say. It was just like, it's not his ability, it's what he puts out there. And just like the feeling of like everybody else is hustling, why aren't you? You know what I mean?
Oh, I think of his heavyweights. Lunch has been canceled today due to lack of hustle. Deal with it.
Do you just call us skinny wieners?
It belongs to Seymour Butts. But 91, he has a great season. And this is when the Indians have started to get some guys.
Yep.
They fleeced the Padres for Sandy Alomar and Carlos Baerga. They're starting to stock their farm system with actual talented players because of John Hart. Because he said when he took over, he inherited Albert Belle and nothing.
And nothing, yeah.
Like, literally, he's like, the only thing we had was a guy I really didn't trust.
Yeah, seriously, though.
But he had 28 home runs, 31 doubles, and 95 RBIs. He was an RBI machine.
I'll tell you something that I absolutely loved about him, because I was trying to like look up him talking about himself, and he was just like, I love hitting home runs. I love hitting a double.
I saw that.
My favorite thing is driving in a run. And I was like, that's awesome.
This
as
is
a
why
teammate.
this is why coaches love him.
Yes.
It's like, God, I'll deal with whatever, but oh God.
His favorite thing is an RBI. You're just like, that is the kind of hitter I want.
And he led MLB multiple times in sacrifice flies and hits. Like he was a very smart baseball player.
Oh, yes.
While we poke fun, this dude was great.
Oh,
he was
he
a
was
great player.
unbelievably great. Yeah.
91, I don't know if you read anything about on May 11th, he's at Yankee Stadium, and a fan kept chanting and jeering at him, "Hey, Joey, there's a keg party at my house."
Oh, yeah.
So Albert, because the guy was obviously messing with him, Jeff Pilar, he gets 15 feet away from him with a baseball and pegs it into his chest.
Like, and this is such an Albert Belle story where he just walked over there calmly and threw it as hard as he could. And then I remember something about like the Indians were like, we thought he was a problem, and then that happened, and we were like, oh, this is going to be like a bunch of problems.
In his defense, maybe don't make fun of him. Maybe just say, "Hey, Belle, you suck." Don't cut him so deep. Look, if you fuck around, you're gonna find with a person like this. If you fuck around, you will find out.
Yes,
because he always takes the cheese.
No,
every single time. But 92 and 93, he establishes himself as a legitimate MLB star.
And this is when he starts his streak of 30 home runs every single year, and it's you can really see the difference between 90, when he was kind of like an alcoholic and struggling with authority, if you will, and all that kind of stuff, and literally 92 to like 98, 99, where you're like, oh, he was like, if not the best hitter, he's like second, third best hitter that year.
Oh, for sure. I think now I'm just going to change my name to John and become sober and stop doing comedy. I feel like that's a good... Albert, you're showing me the way as we're doing this podcast.
John Dotola. Doesn't work.
Doesn't work. He was suspended twice in 92 for charging the mound, because happens. In 312 games between the two seasons, though, he hit 275, 72 dingers, and 241 RBIs on a team that's not yet congealed.
And yeah,
like,
not scoring a lot of runs.
He's a staple in left field. He led the league in sacrifice flies in 93. He had an all-star in silver bat in 93 as well. That year, on September 23rd, though, he ended up beating a man with a ping pong paddle at a nightclub.
Which that's the other thing where you could just tell he was like, I could beat your ass with anything. I'm going to take this ping pong paddle, and it's going to be ridiculous.
Hey, how come you get a pool cue? Yeah, I'm pretty sure Albert was tired after beating me mercilessly. But the guy was chanting Joey at him. I mean, look, No one deserves to be physically assaulted, but you're kind of bringing that one on yourself,
I was just
dude.
going to say, there's a point where you see him getting unbelievably angry and you just keep going. You're like, well, I mean, your fate's in your own hands.
I mean, and he was a very large individual, like muscular and
Yes.
powerful.
Yes.
But 94, they move into a new stadium, Jacobs Field. The Indians do, and Albert's the premier star of this team. Then there's buzz because they're not crappy anymore.
Yeah, they actually have like a couple of good players, and Albert is turning into this player that people kind of doubted he would, which is just an unbelievable hitter.
So he's an all-star and wins the Silver Slugger again. They win the wild card spot. They're only, I think, a half a game behind the White Sox in the Central that year. And it was their first winning season since 1986. God.
That's brutal.
He hit 357. Only one guy in the AL was better that year, and he was a man who tried to catch a ball with his hat, Paul O'Neill.
Paul O'Neill, yep.
35 doubles, 36 dingers, 101 RBIs, and I say this because he only played in 106 games. But there was a very interesting event that happened this year. July 15th, they're playing the White Sox at Comiskey Park, and acting on a tip, Chicago manager Gene Lamont asked the umpires to check Albert's bat for cork. And I don't know if we brought it up on this podcast, but certain guys will cork their bats to generate better bat speed and have the ball bounce off a little bit better.
I got a question. Is speed important?
Speed is the name of the game, Chris.
Well, there you go.
So, which one do you want? So, the running joke was from Omar Vizquel and a number of his teammates, all of Albert's bats were corked.
Well, that's because they go and they replace it. We'll talk a little bit more about it. But somebody asked, they were like, why didn't you just replace it with another one of his bats? And they were like, they're all corked. Every single one of them is. Every one.
Well, that's the thing about that is there are players who will use corked bats in batting practice.
Yes.
To like put on a show for, the fans there. Like, just hit some dingers, but hit some extra long dingers.
Yeah.
So, which is understandable because it's not during a game.
No.
And it's for fun. But because they know all his bats are corked, they come up with basically the most John McClaney of plans ever. Reliever Jason Grimsley, the one who ratted out Roger Clemens to the feds.
Oh, yeah.
They say, hey, Jason, want to take one for the team? And he's like, how do I do that? He crawls into the air ducts at Comiskey Park, Bruce Willis style, drops into the umpire's room during the game where they're holding the corked bat, and he said, I replaced it with not an Albert Belle bat, but a Paul Sorrento bat, one of his teammates.
The umpires came in, and it was so ridiculously obvious.
Yeah.
It was obvious somebody had broken in through the roof, and then they looked at the bat, and Sorrento's name was on the bat because you would get your individual bats, they would put your names on them.
Yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
it was so ridiculously obvious that they ended up suspending him.
10 games, I believe it was reduced down to 7. All I could think of was a Paul Sorrento bat. You didn't get anything for this, like money. You got to understand what a crumpet is to understand who Albert / Joey Belle is.
Oh, that's so true.
But they can't finish the year because of the strike.
Yep.
Because of baseball. But in 1995, you're thinking, this might be the best team in the American League, and Albert puts up one of the best offensive seasons of the 1990s for anybody.
And he almost does it again. This is the other thing that I thought was so interesting. He was such a great hitter that they did this. This happened against the White Sox, and then they came in and were like, no, we'll take you on our team later on.
Oh, I know,
because
right?
it's such a ridiculous thing that they were like, no, we know how good of a hitter you are. Come on over.
Cork or no cork, we got your back, Albert. So in 143 games, he leads the AL in runs that year. He ties for the lead in RBIs, leads Major League Baseball in doubles with 52, and then he had 50 dingers. That had never been done in the history of Major League Baseball up to that point.
Yep.
I should add 50-50 in that fashion.
Yeah.
Slugged 690, led in total bases, and hit 317. The entire lineup was stacked. We probably brought it up in the Lofton episode.
Yeah. Because I wanted to bring this up because this was the year that him and Kenny Lodton kept getting into it.
Yes.
Because Albert not Joey anymore, loved to have the clubhouse so ridiculously cold. So like he would set the thermometer to literally like 40.
Oh, my girlfriend's the same way in the house.
And then Kenny would come in and adjust it back up to like 50, and they had like a war where they went back and forth adjusting it, and then Albert put it down to 35 and smashed the thing with his bat.
Which is just like, oh God.
He's like, I win.
I saw this interview with Kenny Lodton where the woman interviewing him brought up, you played in the same outfield as Manny Ramirez and Albert Belle. And then the look in it was like when Harry finds out the toilet doesn't flush in Dumb and Dumber. It's just that do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Because you're in the middle of cheeky and fun shenanigans and cruel and tragic shenanigans.
God.
Like, oh, God. But anyway, he's a 50-50 man this year.
Yep.
The Indians win 100 games, win the AL Central. They're back in the playoffs for the first time since 1954, which is ridiculous. Mind you, he tied Babe Ruth's record for home runs in September.
Oh, yeah, because he had 18 or 19?
17, yeah.
Yeah, it was, a ridiculous, really a great season that does not get an MVP nod.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, do you want to talk about postseason or MVP? So let's talk about the MVP thing. Okay. So you would think a guy who put up stats like that would be a shoo-in for the MVP. But he gets the Barry Bonds treatment and gets it hard.
Well, if you don't know this, baseball writers are the ones who vote for who the MVP is. They hated him. Like,
I don't even think hate is the right word.
Yeah.
Like, they're whatever's stronger than hate. I mean, and he hated him right back.
Oh, yes.
Like, I mean, he hated him right back.
Yep.
He basically complained that they should only allow former baseball players to vote on this. Writers should have no say. They gave the MVP to Mo Vaughn, which, don't get me wrong, he had a great season,
but not
like
50-50. It's such a ridiculous stat, just that. And then you look at all of his other stuff on top of it, and you're like, oh, yeah, like he was the best baseball player that year.
Oh, God. So we get to the 95 and they play the Red Sox in the divisional series. And in game 1 on October 3rd, 95, it's the bottom of the 11th. They're down 4-3, and he hit a solo homer to tie the game. And the Red Sox manager, Kevin Kennedy, asked the umpires to check the bat.
Yep.
I don't know if you saw when he was in the dugout flexing and pointing to his bicep.
Yep.
Oh, that was so good.
I love that.
They ended up winning in the bottom of the 13th on a Tony Pena walk-off dinger, and they sweep the Red Sox 3-0. The ALCS against the Mariners, he had a solo dinger in a Game 1 loss, and although he hit only .222, they roll through him in 6 games, and then they get the unstoppable force versus the immovable object matchup with the Braves in the World Series in that wonderful Kenny Lodton strike zone.
Well, and I was just going to say, this is where people said offense versus defense.
Yeah.
Where it was like the 3 best pitchers against really, if looking back on this Indians team, you're like, God, they must have been putting up like 10-run games all the time.
Oh, yeah, and this was like the height of the steroid era.
Oh, yeah.
So the fun baseball era.
There you go.
So they lose the first 2 games, and before Game 3 at Jacobs Field, during batting practice, which he was always surly and caffeinated, Mr. Freeze, that's what they nicknamed him because of the thermostat issue. He hated media in the dugout at any point. Didn't matter who the hell you were. If you were part of the media, he wanted you out.
Even if you were a former baseball player, he didn't understand why they would be in the dugout, which I actually agree with him on this.
There's things about him where you're like, logically, that is so correct.
Yep.
But you acted the way that you did. There, you catch more bees with honey than vinegar.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying. So in the dugout, he cursed out Hannah Storm of NBC, who described it as, initially he screamed at all the media to get out of the dugout, and the language was terrible. 2 or 3 men left. They were frightened. I was the only one who stayed because I was waiting to do an interview with Kenny Lodton. When I stayed, he directed his anger at me. God!
Like, it's so ridiculous that you see why some of the writers would never vote for him. And then you also see, like, maybe the Indians would have been a better team if their clubhouse was a little bit more together.
But you look at the clubhouse, everyone's getting along except one guy.
That's true.
And if he was like a utility infielder, they would have sent him down to single A.
Yeah.
He would have just been finger blasting Tim Robbins' grandma.
I was just going to say, he would have died in the Carolina leagues.
Oh, God. So he's eventually fined $50,000 or he's given the option $50,000 or 10 days suspension, so he just pays the fine.
Yep.
Game 4, he hits a home run off of Steve Avery.
To tie that one?
Yeah, but they ended up losing the game.
But they ended up losing, yeah.
In Game 5, he hit a first-inning 2-run dinger off Greg Maddux in an elimination game. But by Game 6, Tom Glavine pitches one of the best postseason games ever.
Yep.
And they end up losing. He only hit 235 in the series. But the fun doesn't stop, Chris. We have a fun off season. Because on Halloween, what happens?
Some kids egg his house, toilet paper. Some kids went trick-or-treating.
Yes.
And he decided to go for the trick.
Oh, he always takes the cheese.
Yep.
He always takes the cheese.
And then...
Damn poop again.
Quiet devil woman.
Don't put it out with your boots, Albert.
So he sees these kids do this, and he gets in his car and chases them down. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of reports. One is that he hit one of the kids with his car, bumped into, whatever you want to...
And if you really tick me off, I'll run you down in my car.
Whatever you want to say happened. He ended up getting sued for that and settled out of court.
Yeah.
With that family or whatever. Mm-hmm. But God, does he have temper problems?
It's wild. Like as I was reading it, I'm like, oh, I just yell on stage.
Oh yeah,
this is horrible.
Yeah.
So 96, he's in a contract year. And the Indians, he's under the impression they're going to run it back. He's thinking they're going to re-sign Kenny Hill. They're going to bring back Paul Sorrento because who else's bats are you going to use when you get caught for corking?
Exactly.
Right? But he was furious at what transpired throughout this season because not only did they not retain those two guys, they trade Carlos Baerga midseason as well as Eddie Murray from the 95 team. They send him, or he ends up going back to Baltimore. So they're actually in that Carlos Baerga deal. You know who one of the players they got back was? We did an episode on him, Jeff Kent.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He finished out 96 and then went to the Giants in that Matt Williams trade that everyone was pissed about.
Yeah.
So anyway, they do win the AL Central. He has a great season. He leads the AL in RBIs, 148. He hits 311, 48 dingers, 38 doubles. And I did want to bring up his walk-to-strikeout ratio was always usually 1-to-1.
Yeah.
It was always... They were lower for a power hitter, but that just means he's making contact.
Yeah.
Which is what you want out of your cleanup hitter. He had his third straight season of an over 1,000 OPS and as another silver bat and all-star like the year before. They go to the postseason against Baltimore in the ALDS. We did bring this up in the Alomar episodes, oddly enough, because they were on the different teams. They're down 0-2. And in Game 3, they're tied at 4 in the top of the 7th. And this might be his signature moment in Cleveland. Even over 95 and all the bullshit, this is like, if there was any joy, it was this.
Yeah.
So the bases are chucked against Armando Benitez with Kenny Lodton, Kevin Seitzer. And I read they pinch hit, and I actually watched it. They pinch hit for Jim Thome for Casey Candell, a Punch and Judy middle infielder.
Weird.
Because of the lefty-righty matchup.
Yeah.
Which is, why would you do that?
That's weird.
I don't care lefty-right. It's Jim Thome.
I was just going to say
600 home runs.
That's some old school baseball thinking where you're like, no, this is going to be us. We got this. And you're like, no, that's a bad decision.
That was a bad move, Hank. It turned out to be not so bad because he walked. Albert gets to the plate, and Armando Benitez is one of the hardest throwing relievers during his era. Like, he threw just straight gas.
Yeah.
Which sucks if you load the bases because you have to pitch to Albert Belle. Mm-hmm. And on a 1-2 pitch, he hits a grand slam into left field to help him win the game.
Yep.
The following game, though, they end up losing.
Losing the series, yeah.
Alomar. That year, I don't know if you saw, on May 31st, did you see the Fernando Vina play in Milwaukee?
I don't think so. Oh, when he runs him over?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to bring this up because...
He's not wrong here. I actually agree with what he did.
I was just going to say, because he kept blocking the base path of runners, especially our little Joey, And he did it, and Albert literally just
He
goes,
warned him too. He warned him the
if you do
first
it again,
time.
I'm running through you. And then he did, and this was my thing because he ended up getting suspended for 5 games,
Yeah.
reduced to 3. I wanted to be like, how are you going to suspend him for that? That's his lane. I agree. That is the base runner's literal home, and then this guy's like coming into it.
And it's not like he did it in the first inning. He
Yeah.
gave him fair warning. I don't care if I've left things in the toilet larger than Fernando Vina. If Albert, what was it? Better get off the tracks when the train's coming through.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
he just forearms
Oh
him.
yeah.
And knocks his ass.
I'll tell you
down.
what, it's so surprising. You could see the other players were like, what just happened?
Yeah.
But he was the one getting into the base runner's way and acting like it was like, this is baseball. And Albert was like, I'll show you baseball.
I'll show you how to play baseball, Fernando. But after the year, Cleveland's had enough.
Yeah,
Not
they're
only
done.
have they had enough, they can't afford him.
No, because they realized they're not playing for playoff spots anymore. And they're like, we can't pay this guy how much he deserves.
This is almost addition by subtraction because not only do you lose him in free agency, but then you trade Lofton for Grissom and Justice for your team that makes the World Series the following year.
Yeah.
So that might have been a nice little chemistry move.
Yeah, chemistry move. I could see that.
So November 10th, 1996, he signs a 5-year, $55 million deal with the Chicago White Sox. First player ever at $10 million plus a season, I should add.
Yep.
He's going to a team with Frank Thomas and not much else.
Well, I remember this when they were talking about whatever it was going to be 3, 4, 4, 5 in the batting order where you're like, you just walk them because you get Frank on, he's not going to run.
Yeah.
But
He's not legging out a triple.
It's one of those things where it was like, it is such a great 1-2 punch, but not anything else really on their team.
We're going to let Nolan Ryan Noogie Magnet Robin Ventura beat us. So plays decent, a little bit of an off year. Still 30 dingers and 116 RBIs.
Yep.
Was an all-star. His first game back in Cleveland, though, June 3rd, fans owed, and as it rained booze down upon him, they were throwing fake Monopoly money at him. I can't even imagine, like, the madhouse that was to be there.
I can't believe this happened on Dozen Egg Night.
Oh, God. I don't know what's wrong with Albert. He smells like Christian Slater.
Oh, man.
But because he made the All-Star team in Cleveland, he didn't show up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't even play. He didn't show up for batting practice, the home run derby, just didn't bother playing in it. But 98, you could argue this might have been his best season.
I was just going to say, the 50-50, you look at it, but he was so close of getting that again, and then all of his other stats were, like, way better.
He won a silver bat that year. He had 328, 49 dingers, 48 doubles, 152 RBIs, which that's a team record. That still stands for the White Sox, which is ridiculous. Led the AL in slugging and OPS and total bases and sack flies. That's amazing. You would think, oh, he's just going to be in Chicago for the rest of his career.
But
Nope.
his contract had an interesting clause on it that said he had to be in the top 3 highest paid baseball players, and the White Sox got to a point where they're like, we don't want to give you an extra $5 million a year.
Yeah.
It's not worth it to us.
We're not winning.
We're not winning. Exactly.
Like, it's-
exactly. Well, it's the White Sox.
Yeah, I mean, it is the White Sox. But signs a 5-year, $65 million deal with Baltimore.
Yep.
And
Also, I didn't know. I couldn't see when because he starts to have hip problems. And
this is beginning this season.
And I'm wondering if it was towards the end of his White Sox career or whatever, but they were like, this is just going to get worse. Or was it when he went to Baltimore, it started to really
I think
bad.
I think at Baltimore it kind of really started affecting him. His first year, though, he had 37 dingers and 117 RBI. There was a game where he almost had 4 home runs. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Against the Angels, where he got hit going for his 4th home run, and he refused to take his base.
He refused to take the base. I loved that.
Which I love.
Yeah.
Like, fantastic. The Orioles are very shitty, though, so it doesn't make much of a difference. 2000, still 281, 23 dingers, over 100 RBIs, but in September that year, it's revealed The Orioles are calling him totally disabled due to the osteoarthritis in his hip.
Yep.
And on October 1st, 2000, in his final at bat, he hits a dinger.
But nobody knew it was his final at bat.
Nobody knew.
So it wasn't like, oh, this guy's going to be out. It was like his hip got so bad that they were like, because he retired, but he stayed on the Orioles for the like insurance purposes or whatever. Whatever the hell. But it was one of those things where you're like, next year, this is going to be our guy again. And it just happened so fast that nobody, I feel like nobody outside of probably his inner circle saw it coming.
No, did want to bring up, he was the fourth guy, the club is now 8 people, to have 8 straight years of 30 dingers and 100 RBIs.
Yep.
Do you know the 3 guys who did it before him?
I know it was Ruth, Fox.
Gehrig.
Yeah.
That is some elite company.
That's what I mean, because he was the first one outside of those guys in that era. So nobody did it from, 60 to whatever, 98?
Oh, yeah, it's ridiculous. And when he retired, 295 batting average, 389 doubles, 381 dingers, 1,239 RBIs, 5-time All-Star, 5 silver bats. You would think
should have won MVP.
Should have won MVP. There were a couple years he finished 3rd, too.
I know.
Which is ridiculous. So you would think he'd be a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame, and then you realize, oh, the writers vote for that.
Which I wish they had the writers, because I feel like they would not be hated as much if they kind of overlook their own bullshit. Where if they were like, these numbers deserve, I don't care what an asshole he was, these numbers deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
He's on the veterans list now, which is
that's
former ball players.
Yep.
So I don't know what kind of chance he has. Bill Madden of the New York Daily News said, sorry, there will be no words of sympathy here for Albert Belle. He was a surly jerk before he got hurt, and now he's a hurt surly jerk. Oh, my God. He was.
But that's my thing. I don't care what, because I get it. He was an asshole. That doesn't take away his numbers.
No, it doesn't take away what it, like, when you thought of American League power hitters,
that
maybe Frank Thomas is better. Of all the guys, like, that's it. You would think, right?
But Bell was, and this was before his hip started to come in, he would get like 20 stolen bases a year. So he wasn't, he was a great base runner, like you were saying, outfielder. He had all the 5 tools that people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But
he didn't have that 6th tool, compassion.
Compassion. Oh my God, that's so good.
Oh, Albert, I'm so sorry, but even if you don't get into the Hall of Fame, any kid who watched baseball in the 90s knew who this guy was and what a great player. Disturbed soul, though. And I don't know why, but I can't figure it out.
I do think he will get into the Hall of Fame through the Veterans Committee, whatever.
Not if Kenny Lofton's voting. You wrecked my boombox, asshole!
That was the other thing. He took a bat to Kenny Lofton's boombox in the clubhouse. The stories are so ridiculous that you're like, it must have been hard to play with him.
I mean, he's just sitting there with a coffee pot, like, don't fuck with me, don't you dare.
That was the other thing they said was he would chug coffee.
He would. Could you imagine if he was taking coffees with greenies in it?
I'm pretty sure he was.
I mean, he might have butt fucked an umpire.
Oh,
like,
my
let's
God.
be honest. Like, call that a strike?
Yes. I'm not taking that. I'm not taking that first. I'm not going to first.
I'm not. No. He hit you. I'm not going.
I'm not going.
It's ball 2.
Serve it up.
God.
All right, Albert Belle.